Hello and welcome to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. I'm Steve Smith, your host. How cool is it to be an Aussie? Having just had the two legendary, cool as a cucumber Aussies, Mark Leishman and Cam Smith, mullets personified, taking out the Zurich Classic. What a spectacle for team golf that was. Welcome to episode number 17. Now, an intro into today's episode being that, as I mentioned, of number 17. We do Walking the Fairways. We're going to traverse the countryside, letting you know a few more bits and pieces of what's happening. We'll do that reasonably quickly today because what I have in store for you is a return of the Design Brief with Harley Kruse from Kruse Golf. So we'll have a little bit of a chat with Harley a little bit later on in the episode, and I recorded it earlier on in the week and had a good chat with Harley about a few bits and pieces that he's been up to. He's been a busy man and he's doing a bit of work all over the place at the moment. So we'll get into it with Harley later on with the Design Brief. But let's get stuck into Walking the Fairways. On Walking the Fairways, we're going to start in Victoria to Craigieburn Golf Club, which is in the outer northern suburbs of Melbourne. They're having their 4th and 7th greens currently rebuilt by a construction company called Global Turf. Now, the 4th green is finished at the moment with brand new turf on top of the greens, and it's growing in already as we speak. And the 7th green, well, it's only days away from having the surface completed on it with brand new turf as well. So a couple of things happening around Craigieburn. If you've been there, if you remember, if you've played there, I haven't. I've been past it, but haven't stopped in for a game yet myself. If you've been there, you'll see what's going on at Craigieburn there. They're 4th and 7th, but all good things happening heading into winter. It's going to be interesting to see when they'll get this up and running because it's always a little bit difficult growing in towards winter, whether they will be able to open them for play, getting towards the peak of the cold conditions. But we'll keep an eye on it for you and let you know how it's going down there at Craigieburn. One of my favourites in Victoria is that of the big-hearted Leongatha Golf Club down in the southeastern parts away from Melbourne. And as I said last time, it's about 2 and a bit hours out of Melbourne City. A bit of a drive, but in the beautiful parts there down the southeast side in the country as you move away from the city there and the beautiful countryside that's down that way in Victoria. It's fantastic. Now, I mentioned in the last podcast that they've been busy doing work with their staff and volunteers out on course, and they continue to do more at Leongatha, which is great to see. Now, they've completed resurfacing of some more of their green surrounds, and this time they've got through their 3rd and 4th green complexes of their green surrounds, again with fescue. So really getting into that beautiful cool season mix of grasses, which is going to allow the ball to bounce and run and move, and that bit of ground game instead of some of the warmer season grasses that don't quite allow that effect. So they're reintroducing and doing some new grass with the fescue around their greens. Really good to reinstate that quality surface around there, which is fantastic for that course and for any golf course as well. Like I say, I keep harking back to my experience at Barnbugle, and they have fescue all over their golf course, so I know just how good it can be. Now, also at Leongatha, they've finished their 16th ladies tee, is now open again after being resurfaced as well down there. So they've been doing a little bit of work, and that is my understanding for them. They've finished the work for 2021 with their fescue resurfacing around their green complexes for now, and they'll be doing a little bit more next year. But good stuff for Leongatha moving into the cold time. And by the time spring comes around, that course is going to be in ripping condition. Absolutely fantastic. Now we move away from Victoria into New South Wales. I mentioned it's going to be a reasonably quick Walking the Fairways this time. We get into Sydney on the northern beaches where I am, and we start off with Palm Beach Golf Club, which is right at the tip of the northern suburbs on the northern beaches there of Sydney. Now, they've got a couple more greens. I went up and saw it just a couple of weeks ago. A couple more greens being rebuilt there at the moment under the design of Craig Parry. There's quite a bit of work happening. It's only a 9-hole golf course, and it's a reasonably small 9-hole golf course, but they're trying to improve the facility, improve the golf course, improve your playing experience, and Craig is the man behind some of that work there. So it'll be interesting to see. Look, there's a bit going on there, and it's affectionately known as Palmy. So watch this space for when things are completed so that you can enjoy all full 9 greens again. So couple of temporary greens happening, which makes things a little bit short, a little bit dinky. For those that play Palmy, they're probably okay with it. They're stalwarts of the place. They're not seasoned, golfers that expect the top level Royal Sydney and that sort of stuff. So they just get out and enjoy golf. And when you go past Palmy Golf Club, you can just see that people are enjoying playing there. It's in a beautiful location. It's wedged between 2 beaches, more or less, one on Pittwater and one on the ocean side. It's fantastic. And look, won't be too long before, I'd probably say pushing out towards the back end of spring, you'll really start to see some of this stuff finished and nicely playable. So we'll see how they keep going with Palm Beach. Moving north onto the central coast of New South Wales, into Wyong Golf Club on the central coast. Now, they have just completed rebuilding the 9th tee, including getting the surfaces and the surface levels back, where they really wanted them, and also returfing that surface with new grass. Now, they're hoping for it to be open for play around the end of May into June. Again, I personally think that's going to be a bit of a challenge because we're getting really cold nights here in Sydney now, probably not so much like down the southern states, but the grasses are switching off already. That's their goal. They're looking for end of May, June, and good. We hope that it's open for play by then. But it's all finished, all been rebuilt, and good stuff happening there at Wyong. Just some little improvements and little changes, and it's great to see. Magenta Shores, which isn't actually that far from Wyong, still on the central coast, just outside Sydney, about an hour and a half north of Sydney. Magenta Shores, look, it's a very well-regarded Ross Watson design golf course. It's not that old. We're talking, I think, around 20-odd years. And it's a wonderful, challenging course. And it is a challenging golf course, and it looks a picture. If you've ever seen any images of the place, if you've been there, you'll know what I'm talking about. Has quite a challenge to it, to its design. And it's a well-regarded golf course up there on the Central Coast. Now, they're just finishing off the touches to the final grades and levels of their brand new spare hole to be. Now, spare hole. So if you know the lay of the land there at Magenta, they've not had a spare hole to their privilege, if you like, to be able to work on a hole, shut it down and have the players move to a spare hole. It is a luxury to have. Some courses don't quite have the space for it. They've said that Ross Watson's picked this area. Now, whether this was always part of the lay of the land, I'm not sure, but it's a par 3 that's set between the current 2nd and 3rd holes at the far southern end of the property. And it's going to be played in a northerly direction when it's completed and ready for play. Now, the flexibility, as I mentioned, of a par 3 spare hole allows the course to be maintained and improved and work being done on other holes around the course. So what this tells me is that they're probably going to look to do some significant work on some parts of the course in the coming years. So if they've never had a spare hole in the past, there's no real reason to have one unless you're going to be doing work. So look, I see this as a preparation for some moderate changes and improvements around the place. Now, what that will entail, I don't know. That's my speculation. I haven't spoken to anyone up there to know that, but that's what I'm thinking, because you wouldn't go and put this in if you didn't need to, if you didn't want to do some significant works to a golf hole and close it down for play for safety reasons, and because it's probably going to be out for an extended period of time, not for a few days. We're talking a few weeks. So that's my guess. That's my sort of expectation of the reason behind it. And there's always flexibility when you have a spare hole that you can use it around, and it gives you that means to be able to do those other things. So good stuff and interesting stuff happening at Magenta. And if you know Magenta, you'll probably know exactly where I'm talking about, wedged between the 2nd and 3rd there. We move into Queensland to a stalwart favourite, Hope Island. They're on the Gold Coast. And look, Nathan Bradbury and his team from Golf Spectrum, they're the contractor who's been doing work and construction for some minor adjustments to the golf course at Hope. and they have been smashing it out, building the new par 3 ninth hole and the new driving range tee there at Hope Island. Construction is now finished. Nathan and the Golf Spectrum guys are gone from this stage 1 lot of works, and they're out. They've finished. It's all ready, and now it's a waiting game for the ground staff, the greenkeeping team, to grow that turf in to enough maturity that's ready for play. Now, when that will be, don't know. Like I said, I'm hearing stuff about it. I haven't spoken to the guys out on course there just yet to find out some detail, but that's where it's at. Construction is completed. I've had a chat with Nathan from Golf Spectrum, and he's moved on to other projects in Queensland at the moment, and but he's out of Hope, and he said that it's finished and it was a great build, and it's all ready to go with time to grow it all in. Now, that the par 3 ninth that they've just built, it's to give you a bit of an idea. It's at the back of the golf course, sort of behind the clubhouse, where their old hitting practice range was around a lake there, and it's a full water carry par 3 that they've got that will now be their ninth hole when it's grown in and ready for play, and it's got 2 large bunkers protecting the front left and the front right areas of the green, and there's also a smaller one behind the green that is probably there to catch the errant long shots when you just get too shit scared on the tee, trying to hit across the water, and you just boom and power one out over the green, and you, lo and behold, you're in a little greenside bunker there, and then you've got a bunker shot back onto the green towards the water if you weren't scared enough the first time from the tee. So that's a few of the little challenges I can describe to you about the ninth that's soon to open in the coming months at Hope Island. But like I said, it looks great, and it's all done there at Hope, so fantastic stuff. Caloundra Golf Club on the Sunshine Coast, further north than in Queensland, further north than the Gold Coast. We moved to the Sunshine Coast. Now, they've recently rebuilt the greenside bunker on the 3rd hole, and they've done it in-house, and that includes new drainage, new edging of the bunker, and new sand. And this looks really, really good. And I always say it's great to see courses improving what they already have. You don't need to, if you don't have the funds, you don't need to sit there and rebuild all of your green and all of your greenside bunkers. You don't need to rebuild a golf hole. If it allows you and your greenkeeping team have the skills to be able to do it, go out there and slightly improve what you have if you need to. And sometimes it's just redoing drainage and a bunker. In this instance, they've done a little bit more, and they've done some edge work and sort of slightly reshaped the bunker on the green side of the 3rd. But it's just a moderate improvement, and it's enough to keep the golf course at its peak. And that's important. There's always little things that need to be done, in my opinion, to keep improving a golf course, and they've ticked it off at Caloundra. So more stuff and a few more little improvements at Caloundra, which is great to see in Queensland. We bounce now to South Australia, straight into one of my favourite golf courses in the whole country, and that's Royal Adelaide. Now, at Royal Adelaide, they've slightly extended their 4th fairway, ever so just a little bit further back towards the tee. And in doing so, what they've done is they've removed a small mound of long rough that was on the centre line of the hole. And if you know the 4th, it's got a big sand crater in front of the tee, and it's blind to the very start of the fairway. So this was probably something. It's a slight improvement to the experience of some of their shorter hitters. To be fair, they're shorter hitting golfers, and it's most likely sort of been something that's just affected those guys, those men and women that don't quite reach or that hit to the start of the fairway, and they've been playing in this mound of long grass from time to time. And the club's decided that, look, to allow for our shorter hitting players a better experience on that hole, we're just going to remove that mound, remove that long grass, and we're just going to make it fairway and short grass a little bit further back towards the tee. And that's those sorts of minor improvements. They speed play up. There's no one looking for balls. It's not too difficult to hit out of when you're the best part of probably still 260 plus metres from the tee. So a moderate improvement to Royal Adelaide. Look, to be honest, they don't need to do a lot of improvements there. I think it's an absolutely magnificent golf course, but all courses, in my opinion, in the same breath, still need to do minor improvements. And this is an example of one of those. So good to see at Royal Adelaide. And the final one in walking the fairways today, we go to Glenelg, so that's not far from Royal Adelaide in Adelaide itself there in South Australia, and they're still doing work cleaning and sharpening up the edges of their bunkers around the golf course. Some of the stuff I'm seeing is where, like on the larger, shallower edged bunkers, so not their deep, stacked turf revetted style pot bunkers, so it's some of the shallower stuff that where they can get a mechanical edger onto, they just zip around the edges of the bunkers, just nice and crisp and sharp and clean, and it looks sensational. I do love it. And you know, it's a detailed definition that they're getting on the bunkers around the golf course. So this is the time of year that they're working on these things, the edges of the bunkers, whether they be the revetted faces or just the normal bunker lips and bunker edging. It's about getting around, cleaning them up, dressing them up as part of their move in towards a cooler time of the year for the golf course. And look, it's a brilliant detailed look for Glenelg, and it looks $1 million. Beautiful. Love the detail. That's it for Walking the Fairways, guys. Let's get stuck into the design brief. We come now, ladies and gentlemen, to the segment called the Design Brief. Now, as you know, in the past, we have a resident golf course architect, and this person is the current president of the Society of Australian Golf Course Architects, has worked with the likes of Greg Norman and Peter Thompson in their golf design arms, and has had their own business under the name of Kruse Golf for the last 10 years. Harley Kruse, welcome to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast.
Hi Steve, great to be here.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate your time. Now, you've done a lot of work around Sydney and around the metro areas in recent years, and I know that you've been to up my neck of the woods where I grew up and did my time working as a superintendent up in the Blue Mountains, and you've been a busy man. Let's start off with that area. Let's start at the Blue Mountains. You've been doing work with a golf course in Blackheath Golf Club that's got a whole lot of work going on. Tell us a bit about where Blackheath is up to, and I've reported it in the last few podcasts that they've been doing stuff, and plenty of it. How's it all going up there?
Yeah, look, it's going well, going a little slow, but it's going well. It's obviously we're a cool climate, we're 1,000 metres above sea level up at Blackheath, so that brings into some really interesting opportunities and golfing wise, because all of a sudden we're in cool season grasses and cool climate. So, whereas the rest of Sydney's warm season and couch grass and kikuyu fairways, up there the real great opportunity up there at Blackheath is to do and focus on the cool season stuff. So up there, they've got a bit of a master plan that I've actually been at the I guess the passing of the baton. The previous consultant was Ross Watson, and Ross has kindly sort of handed me the project, so to speak. He's more or less retired after many years in the golf industry, and he's a founder of the Society of Australian Golf Course Architects, which I'm president of. Ross has kindly reached out to me, and I'm now consulting directly to Blackheath Golf Club on an 18-hole course improvements plan, which they'll roll out over the next 3 to 5 years. And so up there we've redone tees and fairway and green on hole 1, a new 18th green, and also next to hole 1 is hole 16 coming back up the hill. So we've done a new 16th tees, some fairway shaping and a green there. So 3 new greens, and that's the first bit of work at Blackheath for a long time. And the course needs a fair amount as well in other areas. There hasn't been a lot spent on the course in past years, and they haven't had the capacity, but they now have some opportunity to do it, and also integrating some things with the local government, hopefully, where discharging stormwater from the surrounding streets, which is currently sort of just been outflowing into the golf course in a fairly uncontrolled way. We're going to be hopefully getting that water going right across to the club's main irrigation dam, which was also a very important source of water, static water supply during the bushfires 18 months ago. And so the Rural Fire Service are very keen to see some of these dams on the golf courses up in the mountains being a source of water for fighting fires. So the club, local mountains council and RFS are sort of in together getting a grant application done for that. But golfing wise, yeah, look, it's a real thrill. We've been able to get a supply of sod out of Melbourne for our green surrounds, which is beautiful fine fescue. We've got beautiful bent greens that are growing now and getting up to speed, and it's sort of in the growing in phase now to get the course, those first 3 holes that we've done out of 18 ready for play.
That's look, that's exciting to see, and as a lot of my listeners know, I grew up in the Blue Mountains. I spent my time working up there did my apprenticeship at Wentworth Falls, became superintendent, and spent my time there at Katoomba. And I played pennants as a junior and as a senior throughout all those clubs, and I know Blackheath extremely well. I know the holes you're talking about, the 1st, the 16th, and the 18th greens, and like you mentioned, it has been a long time. I can tell you how long it's been. I think it was 1991 when I was a kid when they did their last lot of changes to the golf course. So it's been the best part of 30 odd years since any work has been done to any real capacity at the golf course. And I think it's a great opportunity for Blackheath Golf Club to really bring itself forward and sort of and enhance the ground that it has to work with from a golfing perspective. And I want to touch on, everyone knows that I've recently travelled to Barnbugle and seen the courses down there in Tasmania, and you talked about cool climate. It's 1 kilometre in the sky at Blackheath. It's a long way up, and that does bring with it a lot of cold temperatures for a longer period of the year than Sydney. And I don't think the Blue Mountains courses have utilised that climate to its advantage for good golf, for good grass on good golf. And I know the courses, and I know them very, very well, and I know that they haven't. And Blackheath, you talked about water supply. I know they've got a very good water supply at Blackheath. You talked about the climate in its cooler temperatures and for a longer period of time than that of Sydney. So having come from Barnbugle and seen what fescue does on a golf course, to hearing that you've got sod out of Melbourne, you've got that growing in now at Blackheath as a fine fescue for the surrounds and those areas that are rebuilt outside the greens, I think all of this, for me, points towards a really good, positive, enjoyable change to Blackheath, where people are going to be able to play more of, I say genuine golf without being rude to anyone in particular, but it's the running game, it's the bouncing game, it's stuff that you've introduced to Kalara with the different grass types in their surrounds. It's the stuff we see when we travel to Barnbugle and the King Island courses, and we see it at Royal Melbourne's and some of the tracks that are in the cooler areas of Australia. And you throw back to the British Isles, we're seeing a golf course that's very close to Sydney, 2 hours from the city centre, that's going to have this style of golf come back to it.
Yeah, well, that's right, and that's what I've said to the club. I mean, I said for the club's, the great opportunity to sort of give the club a bit of a shot in the arm is to really, all these course upgrade works, and we're coming from in a couple of areas a fairly low base, so we're anything we do there is going to get a really good improvement in some places. And look, there is some beautiful bits of the golf course as well. Some bits are tight, but just on playing surfaces alone, if you can develop this thing where you've got beautiful bent grass greens and fescue surrounds, and ultimately, fescue fairways, which there's no reason why it can't support.
Absolutely not.
Fescue fairways and any bits of kikuyu that might be there, which don't really like the cold weather. It's fairly easy these days to then control that kikuyu and get rid of it up there. If we do that, then, as I said to the club, you've got an opportunity for people in Sydney to come and play a cool climate type of golf course and play off those surfaces that you might get in Tasmania or the surrounds of some of the sandbelt courses, which are now got some green surrounds and fescue. So you get to play that sort of game, which is a great selling point for Blackheath. So the quality of the turf, if they can bring that into great condition, plus improved architecture and bunkers that drain properly and better presentation, and for there where they've got on the mountains there, they do have issues with drainage and water springs in the golf course and things seeping out. They've had some issues there with groundwater. If they can tackle those and get the fairways firm in places, then you've got a pretty good compelling reason to get up the Blue Mountains and play golf.
Absolutely.
And of course, regional golf around our major cities has been, and regional tourism has been getting a great shot in the arm in the last 12 months. So it gets to the point that in terms of the Blue Mountains, and it's a bit like the Southern Highlands south of Sydney, equal sort of distance away from town, there's a few golf offerings, but all of them are a little bit tired and a little bit worn out in ways that some refresh will see better golf offerings and a good reason, as I've said and sort of chatted with Blackheath Golf Club. If you're going out on a bit of a trip out to Bathurst or Orange to do a bit of food and wine and golf, that all of a sudden you've got a little golf tour where you could take in Blackheath and maybe one or two other mountains courses, and then Bathurst and Orange, and you've got a nice little golf trip.
Mate, absolutely. And you talk about food and tourism in golf, and I know, like I said, having grown up in the Blue Mountains, and now I'm starting to get into a lot more of the history of golf in this country and how it's slowly forged a path with the likes, and I've had a segment on here of Aussie golf history with Dan Suter and Carnegie Clark and Jazz Scott, and these are the forebears of the sport in Australia that brought it from Scotland and laid down some of these earliest tracks. The Blue Mountains was for a long time, in the early days, in the early 1900s, was for a long time a golf destination. Now, a lot of people probably don't realise that anymore, because you mentioned the courses are tired. We've had, and I know it, I've seen it over my 30 years in greenkeeping, that golf courses have changed as grasses have changed, as unwanted or undesirable turf grasses have moved in and changed the way those courses are played. Lura is the oldest in the mountains, and it started in, I think it was 1902 or thereabouts, 1904. Lura was the first track laid down in the mountains, and the others were not long thereafter. But those names that I mentioned were involved in some part of all the courses up there. So the Southern Highlands is, again, similar sort of thing. So we've got this climate that is conducive to these turf grasses for golf surfaces, that with good architecture and that investment by clubs into their courses with good architecture and a good base, to then have the right surfaces reinstated, if that's the right way of saying it, we can get some really good golf experiences coming back out of what once was a golf tourism destination, could now be that again, quite easily.
Yeah, and look, the mountains, with the new, Western Sydney Airport getting built, the mountains are going to be closer to infrastructure, and people realise now they don't have to necessarily live and work in Sydney. So there's there's a chance to live out that way, and I guess a lot of people. There was people that, I guess in Sydney, they bought places near the beach and had, went and cooled off in the ocean, or they bought places in the Blue Mountains and went and cooled off in the mountains, didn't they? So there's a couple of different sort of weekender come tourism cultures there, but certainly, look, great opportunity for golf. Blackheath will never be a long course. It's a short course, but it's a really good fun track, and it's potentially going to be even better with a lot more fun and I think a lot more quality of golf experience that can happen, and really enjoyable. And as I said, part of a bit of a tour, but they've got a sort of local membership of people who live in Blackheath, but they've also got people who live in Sydney and are members of Blackheath as well. So and people, they might have a holiday house up there, or they've got friends with a holiday house up there, and they get up there and have a weekend up in the mountains, and they might do a bit of bushwalking, a bit of food, and a bit of golf, and it's all there. So look, it's a really good track, and there's nothing else that I can think of around Sydney that sort of has that cool grass offering, unless you jump on a plane and fly down to Melbourne or Tassie.
Agreed.
And certainly, so that's its key advantage. And so the turf that we've got, we initially tried to seed, but just again, because it's a cool climate, it was very hard to get the seed up and going and developing, with a competition from a whole lot of ducks that are around on the site. And just the temperatures and the weather, and so to speed things up a bit, we found some turf in Melbourne, some beautiful fine fescue, which is a very similar to the fine fescue that was seeded down in Tassie. In fact, I think the seed mix we even put when we initially sowed the place was called the Barn Boogle mix. But anyway, it's a mixture of sort of chewings and fine fescue, and maybe a bit of creeping red. But the turf we found is similar to the turf. Well, it's the same turf that's used, for example, on some of the key sandbell courses in their green surrounds. RM and is one where that used exactly that same turf. So when it arrived off the truck, it's just spectacular.
Well, so, that's really, really good to hear, mate, and exciting. I keep saying it's exciting for Blue Mountains, and it's exciting for Sydney Golf, because it is still close. It's an easy day trip for a lot of people. So,
it is. Yep,
look,
easy trip.
Very, very good to hear, mate, and we'll certainly be keeping an eye on your work that's happening up there and the golf course to see how it's moving forward.
Yep.
Now, we mentioned that you've been travelling around all over the place, and one of the things that I've seen you've done recently was a trip down to southern New South Wales, to a place, and I'll throw the name out there. Some people may have heard of it and some people haven't, because it's an emerging name of this historical golfing site in Australia that's called Kamarooka. What can you tell us about this early step of this Kamarooka site. Tell us a little bit about its background, and I know it's got an extensive history, but how does golf work into that space, and what are we talking about here when we say Kamaruka Golf Course?
Yeah, well, Kamaruka is a very famous dairy estate that's inland from, if your listeners would know, Merimbula and Pambula. Inland from Pambula, about 20 minutes inland, there's a place called Candelo, and up along the Candelo Creek, north of Candelo, we're talking Bega Valley here, Bega cheese. Everyone would have heard of Bega.
Big dairy country down there.
Yeah, so it's all dairy, and the reason, and basically, in the early 1800s, sort of around I think it's 1836, Kamaruka was established by two Scottish brothers, the Imlay brothers, who set out to, with some big land holdings or land grants, they might have been back then, but basically went to establish a big dairy herd, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of acres back then, and you think about dairying in the Bega Valley in that period of time, you weren't sending the milk to Melbourne or Sydney for milk consumption. You basically made cheese, and
Right.
then you could ship cheese on the back of horse and dray, or the steamships that ran up and down the coast from Tathra and Bermagui and Pambula and Eden. There was a whole trade back then in timber and agricultural products up and down. So anyway, the Kamaruka was established back then in the 1830s, and in the 1860s, a guy called Tooth acquired the estate, and he had Tooth had been educated in Eton in England, and had this grand vision for the estate modelled on some of the big English estates that he'd seen.
Wow.
So he took over what the Imlay brothers had started, and developed a hall on the place, and a church, and various different houses and gardens and orchards, and the interesting thing about the golf course is the piece of land where the golf course is in 1885, was it 1895? 1885 it was. January 1885, the first 11 British cricket team played a match at Kamaruka on the land where the golf course is, and it was a flat bit of land next to the Candelo Creek with a big hill next to it where spectators could sit and watch the visiting British first 11 team come and play cricket there, and they played against a local team made up of 22. So it was the first 11 English side versus a local 22, because Lord Tooth was a mate of the guy who brought the English cricket team out. So he got the team to Kamaruka, and based on the success of that fantastic match on that particular day, of which of course the British first 11 won, he then decided to build a proper cricket oval on his estate, which is called Lord's View, which still exists today.
Wow.
And in 1985, there's a celebratory centenary match that was held between some English test players and some Australian old test players, and so he put a cricket field out there. He moved his family to England, and still would come and visit Australia once every year or two, and while his family growing up and getting educated in England would come out and with big visions and dreams for this estate, and their vision and dream was for a golf course, 9 holes, and a hostel, which would just basically add other dimensions to his estate, where guests could go along and enjoy time on the estate, and part of that enjoyment was to go out and play golf. So in 1914, a young English golf professional and his wife were sent out on a ship called the Ceramic, and got off in Sydney, and then a couple of days later we're down at Kamaruka laying out 9 holes of golf.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's quite a community. It become a community sort of area with, like you mentioned, there was a church, there was a small, group of houses, and I assume these were all for the people that worked on the property as well.
Correct. There was a school, there was general managers' houses, there was cheese making, I guess factories for a better word. So it was an agricultural hub. That whole valley was thriving, and the whole estate, where people lived on the estate, worked on the estate, kids were taught at school on the estate. It was the big grand, the vision was the big grand estate, and there was the hostel that got built and the golf course.
And the golf course. So I assume that's, you talked about cricket there, and having the English first 11 is just mind-blowing to think that somewhere down in southern New South Wales on this rural estate, they were down to play a tour match, effectively.
Yeah.
But it's a form of leisure for the people that worked there and lived in the area to play on the golf course and to play cricket and that sort of stuff. And that's where this course was born from. But it probably, we're looking back retrospectively now, the best part of over 100 years from when it first was laid down.
Yeah.
And there's a particular style of design into that golf course that we don't really see much of in this country, do we?
Well, no, it doesn't exist. It
Right.
really doesn't exist. So the pro that came out with his wife is a guy called Ernest Banks, and he was a golf pro at Dover Golf Club, which was my recollection, a 9-hole golf course right on the near the coast there in Dover, UK, and he'd been approached. There is sort of this misty beginnings of Laurie Octi-Loney being involved with the golf course as well and the design, and we haven't been able to pinpoint really correlating history to that, but there is some sort of connection that says that Octi-Loney was involved with the design. We really don't know, and we're trying to, right at the moment, sort of go into the history to find out if there's any papers or letters or any correspondence between Tooth, who was based in England at the time, and Octi-Loney, who had come back from America in about 1911, because 1913 was about the time that Tooth was came up with the idea of a golf course. And so, yeah, it's not proven the Octi-Loney collection yet, but in the meantime, what we do know is Ernest Banks came out and he came down to Kamarooka and started building this golf course in about September 1914, which by then World War I had broken out.
Right.
And that's part of the interesting connection of this property. So he was building this golf course. He was the golf expert, and the people helping him were men of the district who hadn't been sent off to World War I.
Right.
They were men of the district who were still about, and all workers on the farm, and they were busy with horse and dray and things like that, creating little flat pads for tees and helping to haul soil out to create bunkers and bring soil in to make mounds and ridges and establish 9 holes of golf. There's a lot of interesting backstories and ironies to the whole development, because by September 1914, Tooth's eldest son, who had signed up as an Australian, but born in Australia, he had 3 sons. But the tragedy was that by the middle of September, World War I, the war was only about 4 weeks old. He lost one of his sons to a battle in France.
Right.
And another 4 to 5 weeks later, son number 2, in October 1914, son number 2 died in a battle called Ypres in Belgium. So here is Tooth with 2 of his 3 sons gone in the first 8 weeks or so of World War I.
Wow.
Devastated, golf courses in mid-construction, and by February the following year, February 1915, Tooth himself passed away from a brain hemorrhage. Some say a broken heart from losing 2 of his sons, and 3 years later, a third son died from World War I related injuries. So there's a tragedy in the sense that Tooth never saw his vision built.
Right.
But the estate went forth and finished the golf course, finished the hostel, and the golf course was open for play in latter 1915. But here we are. The owner had passed away and his 2 sons had passed away. So a few interesting things come out of that. The golf course, Banks laid out 9 holes of golf in the way he knew golf.
Yep.
There was no influences from what was going on in Melbourne golf scene. There was no influences from what was going on in the Sydney golf scene. Bearing in mind, this was 1915, so Mackenzie still even hadn't been to Melbourne yet.
Yep.
And Royal Melbourne, for example, hadn't moved and got itself into its place
Not
in
into
golf.
its current form, Black Rock. That's
No,
right.
but
it was still at Sandringham.
But there was a 1901 Sandringham golf course that was of the penal school of architecture, and what Banks had laid out at Kamarooka was what we call the penal school of architecture as well. Basically, lots of cross hazards and heavily bunkered greens, which basically meant you had to fly the ball over the hazards to make your progress down the golf hole or to get yourself onto a green. So there was cross hazards in the form of cross bunkering, cross ridging,
Right.
throughout the golf course, all built by hand or with the help of horse and dray to dump a bit of material. So it was the entire 9 holes was built by hand. There was 32 tees, so you had multiple different teeing options, so you could go and play it several times and get different layouts out of it. But really quirky little green sites with bunkers wrapping right around one edge of a green, and big long crescent bunkers. So it's a bit of architecture that hasn't existed in Australia and for a long time, and the Sandringham course was exactly that.
Right.
Cross ridging, cross bunkering, of which the 15th West Royal Melbourne you can still see today, and that's an element of the West course that Mackenzie and Russell kept from the original Sandringham layout.
Right. Okay.
But, so here we are, Kamaruka. It basically was built that way. It was built in less than 12 months. It was open for play, and it's had mixed success from the day it opened, because perhaps when Banks was building and he came out from the green Isle of Britain where it was all wet and damp, and he's come out and he's probably built this thing in a cool, maybe a wet summer, and then of course they've had some hard summers. So
Indeed.
Eventually the golf course went through ups and downs of being used, not being used, sheep grazing it, whatever. But the local Candelo Township did a deal with the family of the state and created the Kamaruka Candelo Golf Course, which they took over the use of the golf course, but the clear condition was they weren't allowed to do anything to the golf course other than maintain it. The beauty of that, of course, is the golf course has remained intact, but it never had an irrigation system. That's probably why the golf course fell over.
And they, with that rule, with that agreement, like you say, they essentially couldn't ruin, in inverted commas, or destroy any of those old style elements in that original design of the golf course. So they could have grown over, they could have just been laid to grow through old bunker shapes and that sort of stuff. So essentially the lay of the land is kind of still there underneath all of that aging.
Well, it's in fact not just the lay of the land, the tees, the bunkers, the greens.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So what was built,
they are all still there today, and I think there's it was a long way from Melbourne or Sydney in influences. It was a quiet little club, a humble little country club with not a lot of resources, never had the money to put an irrigation system, and never had money to do much. So it never really got meddled with. Had an irrigation system gone in, they might have done all sorts of things to the place.
Sure.
So it's not having an irrigation system has probably been part of the cause of the ultimate failure of the golf course too, because ultimately the original greens end up becoming sort of 5-meter diameter sand scrapes. The golf was played on sand scrapes. Someone would come and slash the paddock once a week, and that was golf at Kamaruka Candelo, and it served the local community well. But eventually it fell to the fact that on the coast, Pamba Marimbula, 27 holes, Tura Beach, all these sort of coastal golf courses were proper 18-hole golf courses,
and they're well respected. Bermagui and the likes, they've all got good tracks.
Yeah, they're all proper greens, and so ultimately the Kamaruka golf course fell to a situation where it wasn't sustainable, and the estate had been sold on to another. In fact, it's been sold twice, probably in the last 15-20 years, and there hasn't been much, and the golf course sort of fell away, and they went and started playing golf on a proper greens golf course back on the coast. So a lot of people have fond memories of playing golf there, but the fact that it never had any money means that there's 1915 layout and its bunkering and its little hummocks and hollows and green sites is still there today.
That's
just
incredible.
sitting there under pasture grasses, ready to sort of clean it up, tidy it up,
ready to be rediscovered, effectively,
and get some irrigation into the green site, so the greens could be restored back to how Banks originally laid them out, and be a fantastic little place to play golf.
Unreal. So, can we talk about there's yourself that's involved in this? Who's sort of got this secondary beginning?
At the moment, this is all just a bit of fantasy at the moment, in the sense that there's a current landowner who's a farmer who's that's his core business, is farming and moving grain and fertilizers around the district. He's not a golfer, and at this stage, there's not a lot of there's a third party who has an interest to bring this back to life, and the third party person recognises the value that Kamarooka has, and its specialty, and its incredible history and maybe sort of heritage value. To be honest, I mean, so out of respect, this is the interesting thing too. Out of respect, and sort of many layers in this golf course. Out of respect to Tooth and his sons that died in World War One, and to the local men who went to World War One, and of course some of them never returned. And there's an honour board in the existing hall there on Kamarooka with a roll of the men who had fought and those who didn't return. There's this deep connection to World War One and the Tooth family and the local men who fought in the war. So, as a consequence of this and paying the respect, 7 out of the 9 holes are named after battles of World War One. Tooth's second son died in Belgium at a place called Ypres, and one of the holes is called Ypres. There's Salonika, which was a battle. There was Hill 60. There's Gallipoli. There's so numerous holes are named after these World War One battles, and so it's got this great history, and there's great stories to be told. I don't know all the stories related to those battles yet, but there's these great underlying stories that brings just a fascinating place, fascinating bit of history, and I think there's a story to be told, and part of that story is bringing the golf course back to life, so that people can play a penal type of architecture golf course. It's not long; it's 2,800 yards.
Sure, reflecting the day.
Correct, and you don't get out there with a modern driver and just belt but you won't have much fun playing with that. But if you played with old hickory clubs, or maybe a 5-wood and a 3-wood at most, and a few other clubs, get out there and have a lot of fun. And there's crossover holes. On the flats next to the river, you could play from the 8th tee, you could play the 9th green, or you could play a bit of cross country golf. So you can mix it up. You could spend hours there just playing cross country golf and having a lot of fun.
It sounds really, really intriguing, mate. Well, that's a story that I suppose, or I'm certainly looking forward to hearing how that advances, and we hear more about it, and hopefully something can come through with bringing it back to life in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully,
the tragedy would be is if it got sold off and broken up and created into sort of half-acre, sort of semi-rural or 1-acre lots for locals to sort of put houses on, and the golf course lost forever, and so there is a heritage value, and there's a lot of meaning to that site. And Kamarooka itself is an Aboriginal word in the local Yuan language. It means wait until I return, which kind of has some irony again with the World War One connection. The fact that Tooth himself never returned to Kamarooka, and basically maybe the golf course is waiting till we all return turn it into a golf course. So it's the name has a deep meaning, and hopefully something can happen, and it would be a part of that whole south coast of New South Wales tourism in terms of just general tourism or golf tourism. Panville, Merimbula, Chura Beach, Bermagui, Kamarooka, some interesting place. They call it the Sapphire Coast down there. Interesting place to go down and play golf. And a bit like you've got South Coast golf with Narooma, Mollymook, and Club Catalina, which is a client of mine. These areas are great sort of tourism destinations and have a lot to offer. And there's golf, there's food, there's restaurants, there's beaches, there's fishing.
And we talked about cheese, and who doesn't love good cheese when you're having a good bottle of red? So look, I think there's opportunity there, and I really hope we hear something positive in the forthcoming years. Hopefully it doesn't take that long, but we'll see how things go, mate. That's really, really interesting story, and a bit of modern history of Australia, which there is that around, and here we are discovering it somewhere with a bit of a golf attachment to it. Great stuff coming out of southern New South Wales. So look, you're a busy man. We know you've done work at Kalara Golf Club in Sydney. We've talked about Blackheath. We'll talk a little bit about Kamarooka. Let's go further afield. Like I said, you do work all over the place, and you've done work with other people in the past. Now you're on your own under Kruse Golf. You're looking at a new project in Vietnam. Now, it's obviously a difficult world. You haven't been able to travel for the last 12 to 14 months. There's the world starting to look like it's slowly going to open up for business travel and a little bit of the like. So tell us about what this new venture is, a new golf course is in Vietnam.
Yeah, look, Vietnam is, I guess, since I was involved and did the design of Da Nang Dunes, which opened in April 2010. And that was sort of, there's been some things going on in Vietnam for probably the last 15, even 20 years, but it's really taken off in the last decade.
I was going to say, you beat me to it. There's a lot of good stuff we're seeing in Vietnam.
Yeah, and the beauty about Vietnam, unlike the rest of Asia, it's got coastal sites that are sand dunes. So Da Nang Dunes was like a bit of Melbourne sandbelt ground in terms of shape, right next to the ocean there in Vietnam and Da Nang. It wasn't links golf directly on the ocean, but anyway, that was Da Nang Dunes, which has been a really busy golf course, doing 70, 80,000 rounds a year since it opened for the last 10 years. So, yeah, look, I've been, the entire working career since being at Peter Thompson's company with Greg Norman and, been basically, we're perfectly positioned here in Australia to service the Asia Pacific region. Sure. Australian architects have a really good reputation in the area, and some of our members of the Australian Society of Golf Course Architects still even live in Asia. So
okay.
So it's been where a fair amount of bread and butter work's been over the years.
Yep.
And so for me, recently, it's an interesting project. Hopefully, I'm going to be vaccinated within the next 4 or 5 weeks, and that might open up the opportunity for the government to start to think about how, in part of our travel bubble, it gets expanded, and maybe by the end of the year, maybe not, but maybe by the end of the year, certain parts of Asia, including Vietnam, might be travel possibilities. But so look, it's an interesting project. It's something I've always wanted to do. It's a 9-hole par 3 course, but over there they call it like a par 3 executive course.
Okay.
But it's effectively a microcosm of a country club within a broader real estate development, where the golf clubhouse is the local. It is the country club, so it'll have the tennis courts, it'll have the swimming pool, the gym, the indoor cinema, the restaurant, and in this case a 9-hole golf course, par 3 course. And I've actually never done a straight off par 3 course off the bat. It's always been 18-hole golf courses, new and things like that. So to do a par 3 course would be really interesting. So at the end of the day, the view of this is to make it 9 proper par 3 holes, ranging from as short as 100 meters through to probably 180, 190 meter length holes.
Right.
But mix it up a lot, where proper full size greens and proper high quality turf conditions, but have multiple tee shots from multiple different angles, which will set up the opportunity to just play the golf course from different angles into the greens, different lengths into the greens. Go around from one set of tees for 9 holes, finish off the 9th green and play from another set of tees and get another 9 holes, which will play completely differently, and you get really 18 fun holes. So space is limited in some of these Asian cities, and so on this particular site there isn't room for a full-size 18, but we'll get a really fun, interesting place, and there is the possibility, and we're just early days of conceptual laying it out, we might find that also not only we get all these alternative tees, but even have it so we can actually reverse the hole. So the 9th green becomes the 1st green, and reverse the layout and play the other way. So it's really, practice putting green, chipping area, just a whole lot of fun golf on this small site. It's sort of orientated around a large water body that's there today.
Yep.
It should be a whole lot of fun.
It sounds like, and I've seen that, some of the concept drawings that you've had, we've just had a look at some of those little bits, but it also, when you're talking about it, it sounds like you've been given a little bit more free rein to make a lot of fun elements to it, a lot of different things, like you said, where you can play it from multiple tees, 1-9, and then you can go from other areas that give the hole, like it might be a swing of sort of 35, 40 degree, a different
maybe
angle,
more. Probably more.
Maybe even more.
Yeah.
And some have got no water carry from one tee, and then you go to the other tee and they've got a water carry to the green. And so you can play 2 different 9s, and then the idea of a conceptualized reversible way around as well. And sounds like there's a lot of parts that you can incorporate into this design around this water body and into what is essentially, on face value, a 9-hole short course, par 3 course. But we've just talked about all these different ways of doing it, ways of playing it, ways of experiencing what is essentially a small golf course.
Yeah. And we have got this large lake in the middle. I mean, there's a few options. We could even have a range there with a tee and have floating balls, you know. So we're in the middle of the, there could be a range in there. We can have, and look, one of the angles too, that, you know, in Japan, there's golf courses that'll have double greens per hole.
Yep.
And there's some pretty funky situations where you might come off the green and then you go right to a tee and you're playing a par 3 hole to one green out to the right, and if you go off the other side of the previous green and go out, and then all of a sudden you're playing another angle to another green out to the left. So within the one space, you've got 2 golf holes that cross over, and so really it's just optimizing what you might be able to get out and make a whole lot of fun out of a small space, just with different ways of thinking about how you do it, and approaching that. And look, it's not necessarily new. You know, what Gil Hans has done with Tokyo Golf Club, the renovation there, which I saw in 2019, is exactly what I was talking about with the Japanese courses, where you've got double greens.
Yep.
And so Gil's taken that advantage of, he's got 36 greens on this property, but are all done properly. You know, it's not just, this is just a spare green. It's not
a token effort. These are real, genuine.
So you've effectively got 36 holes, 18 holes sitting on top of each other on one piece of land, which gives a whole lot of flexibility. And that came out of sort of necessity in Japan from a point of view of seasonal change and, frozen winters and things like that. So anyway, but so look, a lot of fun. It's look, I've got another project over in Asia that's going to happen again once I can travel. But something like that, it'll be the first of its type maybe for Vietnam. I can see it being a whole lot of fun, and it's the sort of place that I see people using it during the day. There's a jogging track around it where you could walk or jog around it. You could have fitness stations around the jogging track. Kids riding bikes potentially, designed in a safe way so these things can coexist.
So it's a multi-use, like I've talked about this a lot. I've talked about what I tried to incorporate when we were at Katoomba and being part of the broader community, not just a golf course.
Yeah.
And you're talking about this new project over there being a community hub where there's so many different elements to that small space. I say small because for Australian golf courses, we often think
it's 12 hectares of land, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, and most of it's water body from what I've seen.
Yeah.
So, but jogging tracks, cycling paths. You talked about the country club feel. It's a multi-use area.
Yeah.
For what is the attraction to the venue is the idea is to maximise the types of people and how many people can get there, and utilise the space. Yeah,
it should be a fairly busy space, and look, it's the sort of thing, it'll be people going there to use the gym on the way to work. They might go there and do some laps of the pool and then have breakfast at the clubhouse and then go off to work, or do the gym and go off to work, or get a quick 9 holes in before going off to work, or on the way home, meet the family there, and husband and wife might play a quick 9 holes at the end of the day, and the kids are in the clubhouse doing their homework, or in the movie theatre, or mucking around a half court of soccer or basketball. There's a few things going. So it's a real sort of, and then the family get together and have dinner at the clubhouse and then go home. So really it's dialing into that local community, and there's a lot of expat Koreans and Japanese, Chinese, in that area. There's sort of high-tech industries going on, and the site was originally owned by a large Korean metal company, and it's been on-sold to a local Vietnamese development company. So it's, and then of course too, these little hubs eventually, you can see young kids growing up in that area and eventually, learn to play golf, and then they'll move out of there and move on to bigger courses. So it'll have its use, and I think it'll be busy, and it's probably half an hour from downtown Hanoi, so the location's good. So that's a lot of fun, and look forward to sort of taking that design to just conceptual at the moment into final documents, and then they want to get on with it this year. So hopefully you can travel soon, mate. You'll be very busy doing some of the. I see construction starting in third quarter. So,
wow. Okay. Righto. Well, look, mate, that's very, very exciting to hear that there's work further afield not just in Australia, but you're doing stuff outside, and you know the Vietnam landscape well yourself, so you know sort of what's going to work over there. And mate, look, exciting stuff to hear. Good to see you're busy. That's the main thing. Good to see Kruse Golf and Harley Kruse is getting out there doing some design work on a few courses here and further afield. And look, maybe, you know, in the not too distant future, we can get you back to the design brief again, and we'll see if you're, you know, traveling somewhere else and doing some other work. We'll see what's on the horizon for Harley Kruse. And mate, we appreciate you stopping by to let all the listeners know what's going in your neck of the woods and what's new to look forward to. Good stuff. Thanks, Harley. Appreciate your time.
Great, Steve. Good to chat.
Thanks,
Thank
mate.
you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you got a kick out of today's episode, number 17, and certainly I hope you're as intrigued as I was with the chat with Harley Kruse and some of the stuff that he's up to, and certainly in the Blue Mountains there at Blackheath Golf Club. And there's it's piqued my interest, the Kamarooka story, and I'd love to hear a little bit going on with that in the future. So looking forward to hearing a bit more of that, and I'm sure we'll catch up with Harley Kruse in the not too distant future. But for now, that's episode number 17. Thank you very much for listening. Please like, share, comment, chat, do whatever you need to do. Happy to talk to everyone, and I do appreciate you listening again as always. I'm Steve Smith. Thank you for listening to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. You hit 'em clean and we'll keep 'em green.